In October 1921, Father Flanagan moved the boys to Overlook Farm. And we have a picture here on the wall. This is a picture of the little boys. He could only afford to rent one truck, so all the little guys got to ride in that truck. The older boys had to walk from 13th Street out to 144th Street to 13 miles. Father Flanagan loved this property. It was a good open area. They'd be free and independent. We have on the wall warranty checks and deeds that he took out mortgages of $250,000 to purchase this property. And then also we have images of the children that lived here in his fundraising materials. And people write in hate letters saying, I don't like it because you have African-American children or you have Catholic children. He'd always write back and say, it doesn't matter child's race or religion. It was everyone's responsibility to help those children. In 1921, Father Flanagan moved to Overlook Farm. And in our display, we have the original windmill from 1921 and the gas pump and neon sign from the 1930s. We have the original map from the property. We're standing around the right there in the green alfalfa field, and down at the bottom is our corporate headquarters today with our large lake. That's the original 160 acres Father Flanagan purchased. He loved this property. It had trees, it had orchards, gardens. The boys could come out here and have a beautiful, clean environment to live in. And that was very important to Father Flanagan. He always wanted to have a farm because he grew up on a farm in Ireland. And on this farm in Ireland, he learned how to take care of animals, responsibility, and he wanted to be self-sufficient. He thought, why buy food when the boys can help raise the food and he can help them with that, and it would help them, teach them responsibility and help with the economy of the home too. So animals and farm operation was always part of the Boys Town program from the very beginning. And they were doing great at the farm, being self-sufficient, up to the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl years. It didn't rain for 3 summers, so they ran out of money and they ran out of food at the same time. No one really didn't care if Father Flanagan was here or not, so he depended on his donors to step forward. And luckily, he had good supporters who came and dropped off some money and some food to keep going. But those were desperate times for the children at Boys Town. And we have a special image, and this photograph shows the boys working in the fields, and you can see in the distance there's nothing for miles. And that's what Father Flanagan loved about being out at Overlook Farm. He was free and independent and could do whatever he wanted to. And then by the time the 1920s came, he needed to build larger buildings. So we have an image of the very first building that Father Flanagan built in 1923, the Omaha building, right over here. This big cutout is the first brick building that Father Flanagan built here at Boys Town in 1923. The citizens of Omaha helped him to build it. He had volunteers stand on the street corners of downtown Omaha, and for $1 a brick, they helped to build this building. And this building housed everything, the school, the chapel, the dormitories. Father Flanagan loved this building. But it wasn't big enough to house all the children, especially during the Great Depression. He wrote that every day during the Great Depression, 5 to 10 boys would come to the door asking to live at Boys Town. And he'd have to send them away. He didn't have the money or food to take care of them. Father Flanagan wanted to create a village for 1,000 boys. So what he did was, on the wall we have this map that he created. He designed the village as you see it today. And also at this time, he incorporated the village of Boys Town in the 1930s. So today we have our own post office, our own zip code, our own community. And on the wall, too, we have some images of the fundraising campaigns Father Flanagan had. He had income bonds, he had bonds of happiness, certificates of indebtedness, all different projects to help pay off the home and keep it open and operating. And Father Flanagan didn't have much money for marketing, so what he did was he wrote to several comic book writers. So Captain Marvel did a whole comic book about a boy coming out to Boys Town, and he did the same thing with Joe Palooka. He loved boxing. So in the Joe Palooka file, there's actually a little panel, and in that panel, Father Flanagan said, all kids are welcome at Boys Town regardless of race or religion. And this is a special image here in the Hall of History. This is a group of the boys from 1937, our junior high boys getting ready to graduate. And the boys are dressed in what's called their church clothes. And even today in the village of Boys Town, we'll ask our boys and girls to please put on their church clothes. And that goes back to these boys and Father Flanagan's theories and concepts, because he said, I'm grading little gentlemen here, good gentlemen. And many of our visitors during the 30s and 40s would comment how happy the boys were when they came to the village of Boys Town and how well they were dressed and how well they behaved, all back to Father Flanagan's concept that he was changing their lives and helping them build new lives. These are images how the boys would live here in the village of Boys Town back in the 1920s, 1930s. And this is a scene of the boys eating in the dining hall back at the time. They would eat family style. Older boys sit at the end of the table and make sure everybody got their fair share of food. And that's still how our families eat today in the village of Boys Town with the family teachers in their home. This is an image of our dormitory. There were 100 boys per dormitory. All these quilts on these beds are made by a group of ladies called the Mothers Guild. And this group has started back up again. They come every month to the village of Boys Town. They have a sewing bee, and they create quilts and Christmas stockings for the children here at Boys Town. And we have our marble display, and marbles was a big sport out here at Boys Town due to the fact Father couldn't afford to purchase a lot of sports equipment. So someone donated a large amount of marbles, and that became the sport out here at Boys Town. And they used to have national marble tournaments out here sponsored by the VFW in the village of Boys Town all the way through the 1940s. And religion was very important to Father Flanagan. We have an image here of Father Flanagan and the boys praying in one of their dormitories. Father Flanagan often said, every boy must learn how to pray. How he prays is up to him. And that was very important to Father Flanagan, that children would have a spiritual life when they lived in the village of Boys Town. And that's what we still carry on today with our boys and girls. In the 1930s, Father Flanagan began the project of having the boys elect a mayor in the village of Boys Town. He wanted to teach them responsibility and how to get together as a group and form a community. So the boys would get together and select one of their own, elect them to be their mayor. And we have some images on the wall. The first election back in 1934, one of the boys, Joe Renteria, he ran for mayor in 1934, and he turned 100 years old during our centennial also. It was a really special event that have him back here in the village of Boys Town. This program proved so successful after World War II, it was taken to Germany. There were 750,000 children in Germany following the program. They also took it to Japan and Korea. They wanted to teach children about democracy. So they felt the Boys Town process of children electing mayors was the best way to help those children do that. And our mayors would run the village. Everybody had their assigned jobs. They work in the power plant. They work in the laundry, the switchboard. Everybody had their assigned job to help keep the village of Boys Town going. And that was very important to Father Flanagan, that the boys be part of the community and all contributing to how it would operate and function in the future. In 1918, Father Flanagan founded our schools at Boys Town. The boys were going to public school, and he didn't like the way they were being treated. Some were being discriminated against due to the race or the religion. And on average, they were about 3 years behind their schoolwork. So he created individualized educational programs for the boys. He was one of the first in America to come up with that concept. So in the image here, you see Father Flanagan in the classroom working with the boys. He would have sat down with each one of them, found out what they want to do, what their plans are for the future, what their hobbies are, and created that special plan for them. He also wanted to teach the boys trades so they could take care of themselves. So we have our woodworking program here at the birdhouse and the printing press. He was creating all these programs so the boys could take care of themselves when they left Boys Town. And he always said play was very important at Boys Town because it was supposed to be a happy place. So when the boys came to Boys Town year-round, they were expected to be outside playing. We have pictures of the boys outside skating, and we have pictures of our first football team from the 1930s. We have an image on the wall of our boxing team. All the boys were part of the boxing program at Boys Town. Father Flanagan brought Joe Louis here and all the major boxers of the era to teach the boys how to box because he wanted them to learn self-defense and how to have a good time and have a fun time together. So Father Flanagan was always encouraging the boys be outside playing year-round, having a nice time in the village of Boys Town, and learning sportsmanship among their fellow boys. And next we have an image of our show wagon and actually a model of it that Father Flanagan took across the United States back in 1918. In 1921, Father Flanagan purchased 3 circus wagons, and we have one of the examples of them here. Volunteers came out from the city of Omaha and taught the boys how to sing and dance and put on a show. And they actually made a film of the village of Boys Town. And they began to travel across the state of Nebraska. They'd stop at a town, put on a show the movie, raise some money, and let people know what Father Flanagan was doing. He was doing all right till he hit a town where the Ku Klux Klan was active. Because it was a mixed-race group and Father Flanagan was Catholic, they wouldn't allow him to perform in the community. So Father Flanagan brought the wagons back to the village of Boys Town. They never again used the wagons, but then he went to Union Pacific Railroad, and for $1 a year, they gave him a railroad car called the Overlook. More volunteers taught the boys how to sing and dance and put on shows, and they would travel across the United States every year in this railroad car. Father Flanagan loved it because the boys got to see America, and the boys loved it because they got to visit different communities, and people got to learn about Boys Town and its programs. And several of the boys became band leaders from that experience of traveling with road shows. And Father Flanagan loved technology, whether it be using trains or the media. And back in the 1920s, he began a media campaign to reach out to the people of America through his radio program called Links of Love. In the 1920s, Father Flanagan began his radio program called Links of Love. He wanted to reach out to the American public and let them know about his theories and concepts in child care. So this program was broadcast every Sunday afternoon, and the boys would come on and they'd talk about life in the village and what was happening, special visitors coming to the village, and the band would play, the choir would sing. So the boys were a very important part of the program. And this ran right up to the 1940s. And we always say if Father Flanagan was alive today, he probably would be Googling and streaming and discussing his theories and concepts through the media of today. On that program, he also talked about the importance of child labor laws, because boys would come to him and tell horror stories of being abused in factories and mines. during that time period. And from those articles that Father Flanagan discussed on the radio and in magazines, someone in Hollywood read about Boys Town, heard about it, and they contacted Father Flanagan and they said, this might be a good story. So Father Flanagan sold the rights to the movie for $5,000 to MGM Studios, and they came out and actually filmed the movie in the village of Boys Town. The movie was a smash hit and helped MGM Studios make a lot of money, but for Boys Town it actually cost us money because everyone assumed Boys Town received all the proceeds and we didn't, and so it took about 4 or 5 years for our donations to get back in order again after the movie came out. And Louis B. Mayer loved the movie Boys Town. He wanted to make Boys Town his official charity, so he offered Father Flanagan $1 million to move to Beverly Hills. Father Flanagan said, well, Boys Town and Beverly Hills is probably not a good mix. I want to stay in Nebraska. So Mr. Mayer gave money to build one of the dormitories, which our boys and girls still live in today, as apartments. The movie proved successful for Spencer Tracy, who portrayed Father Flanagan, and won the Best Academy Award in 1939 for portraying Father Flanagan. We have it on display here in the Hall of History. It's very worn because people would pick up the Oscar and rub it because he gave it to Father Flanagan the day after he received it. Father Flanagan had it on his desk for 10 years. People would come into his office, rub it for good luck, and they rubbed the gold right off the Oscar. And we have it on display in the Hall of History. It's under bulletproof glass and alarmed because it's very important to the history of the Academy Arts and Sciences because he was the first actor that won consecutive Best Academy Awards. And this movie helped Boys Town to become a internationally known presence and helped Father Flanagan become a world advocate in the care of children across the United States. And that work led him to going overseas after World War II to help the war orphans. In 1947, the United States government asked Father Flanagan to go on a special mission overseas. After the war, there are millions of war orphans and they needed assistance. So he went on a mission to Asia. It proved so successful, President Truman said, could you please do a similar mission to Europe? And that's where Father Flanagan was at when he passed away in May of 1948 in Berlin, Germany. He was age 62 years old when he passed away, and he always said he wouldn't be buried at Boys Town. So President Truman's had his remains brought back to the village of Boys Town, and his tomb is in our Catholic chapel, the Dowd Chapel. 2 days after his funeral, President Truman came here and laid flowers on Father Flanagan's tomb to thank him for his work and his mission.